Stav and Jeremy.
Thanks so much, Annie, for the kind introduction. And yes, I did put some books behind me to seem studious. And thanks, Kelly, from IBA, for having me host the panel, and welcome, Jeremy. So again, use that Q&A icon in the bottom left of your screen. If you've got questions, again, anonymous, please encourage you to ask your questions throughout the webinar. We'll either get to them throughout or at the end of the session. Jeremy, some folks that are joining us today have heard of the likes of APRA or AMCOS or perhaps PPCA, but let's start in the most obvious place. What is OneMusic Australia?
Start at the beginning. It's a good place to start. Thanks for having us along. So as you mentioned, OneMusic is a joint venture between APRA and the PPCA for the purposes of licensing music in business. Some, as you said, may or may not be aware that previously you needed 2 licenses when you were using music in a business, one from APRA AMCOS and one from the PPCA. Both organisations sort of look after different sort of rights. And so obviously merging those two together into OneMusic is hopefully going to make things a hell of a lot easier for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Far more seamless. And I guess, in part, one of the reasons I was asked to join today was, yes, have a background in singing and songwriting and the kind of artist side of things, but also I work in independent brewing. So a question I imagine for any publicans or, people that work in venues or perhaps, are running their own breweries that they might have is, do I need a license? Do I need to be dealing with you guys?
Absolutely. It's a great one to raise. I mean, we sort of definitely take for granted, perhaps with our background, Stav, but basically the Copyright Act says that if a business is using music in a commercial way, so if you're in this instance having bands play in a brewery or having background music in a brewery space, a license is required, because that's bringing music out of a personal space like your car or your living room or something like that, and bringing it into a commercial enterprise. So whenever that occurs, a license is required. Obviously not only in the hospitality industry, but across all industries as well.
Yeah. And certainly from, I'm sure you could speak to this too, Jeremy, is that, when you are a musician, certainly, those royalties, though sometimes meager, are very helpful in terms of, the income that an artist is trying to generate. And certainly when you look at intellectual property in Australia and the exploitation of it, whether that be music, film, television, books, I think if you look at its contribution to GDP in Australia, it's actually larger than mining. So it's, yes, we're very segmented into different forms of the arts, but it's a really important part of the Australian economy. So, having these licenses, yes, required by law, but also really important to the livelihood of musicians.
Absolutely, Stav. And I think, that's an important one to raise. And I mean, it's probably the subject of a completely separate webinar about sort of arts advocacy and what the arts means. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I can only speak for myself as a touring musician for about a decade. Those royalty payments really did, I said this in a webinar the other day, really meant sort of fuel in the tank. It was accommodation, it was food, it was very, very real outcomes. I'm sure you've had similar experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. A topic probably to bring to life, in another webinar or for another day. But I know that it's APRA's hope that we become a net exporter of music here in Australia, much like Sweden is a net exporter, and we've got the talent and capability to do it. But let's get back to licenses. So what exactly does the, license cover when it comes to music use in the brewing industry?
Definitely. I mean, we have a hotels and bars license, a hospitality license, and we license most brewery spaces under that license. It's a tiered system based on the number of devices that are in use in the venue. The vast majority, and I'm sort of leading the witness here a little bit, but obviously everyone's using digital services these days, like Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc. The vast majority of the 278 breweries we've currently got licensed nationally, the vast majority of those are using our gold package, which is a single device using a digital device like a phone, tablet, etc., to transmit music, and that comes to about $983 per annum. So that's the vast majority are licensed under that tariff. Yeah,
and that's annually for an annualized.
That's annually, yeah, and it's tax deductible.
Okay,
which is a nice way. What
about weddings, private events? How do we license those?
Weddings, parties, anything. Speaking of music, so there is a events part of the license that really only comes into effect when there is a dedicated venue space that sits outside of general sort of public use. Do you know what I mean? So, and that has a separate sound source. So, look, I can't think of one currently, but perhaps it's the case at Hawkes. If Hawkes were to have a completely separate space that could be hired, that had a completely separate sound system that you could rent out, then we would be looking at the venue or the event part of the license. Again, as I said, if you can call up and reserve a table, that doesn't count. You know what I mean? We still count that under our background music license. As I said, vast majority just falling under that single device usage.
And just for clarity, you may have covered it just in your spiel before.
No, it's all right.
There's 278 breweries that are licensing nationally. 144 of those, so 51% of them are also have live music performance at their breweries. Use of just say the one device and Spotify versus having live music there, that will change the license type that you have to utilize through OneMusic.
Absolutely. So the tariff we were just talking about, the gold package, is for background music in the venue. Apologies if I sort of didn't make that clear. I'm sure Rob or Mark or Sarah in the chat can put the specific percentage, but we take it's a 2.2% of annual expenditure on live music is paid in a fee for live music at the venue on top of that gold package, or background music package, I should say. I think 2.2 is correct. I don't actually have it in my notes, but I'm sure Rob or Sarah or Mark can speak to that in the chat.
Yeah, and I've just got in my notes here that there's a how to host a live music in a small space booklet.
So we can provide that, and perhaps we can attach it later. But obviously, we can email that out to anyone that's interested. Obviously, more than happy to help walk people through how to get more live music in venues, for sure.
Yep, sure. And so aside from the booklet, I'm throwing something a bit different at you here, mate. It's not in some of my pre-prepared questions, but when people do have individual queries, are they coming to you? Are they coming to someone else at OneMusic? Are they, can those details be shared as to, quite specific inquiries?
Absolutely. I mean, if you shoot to onemusic.com.au, we've got an FAQ section there that goes into the weeds right down to how music is distributed, how royalties are distributed, etc., etc. So first port of call, if you do have any questions, fang over to the website. hello@onemusic.com.au is just that will go to our customer service team. That can be forwarded on to Rob or Mark or Sarah or myself as well.
Okay, wonderful. So maybe a question that comes up from, whether it's venues or brewers, anyone in the kind of venue space, but why doesn't, say, Spotify or Apple Music or any other kind of digital music streaming service, why doesn't that subscription cover off their business for these kinds of licenses?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, as you can imagine, it's a question we get quite a bit. If you dive into your T's and C's of any of the digital music services, be it Spotify or Apple Music, et cetera, it says in the terms and conditions that it's for private use only. So when we are bringing that service into a public environment, like we were talking about earlier, licensing is required. Yeah.
Yep. Digital copy / digital delivery. Please explain to us.
Yeah. So this is one from the days of it's the dub, what we call the dubbing license. So from the days of CDs, tapes, etc. When a copy is made of music, that requires licensing separately. So when we, according to the Copyright Act, when we are taking that copy of a recording from Spotify to our device, the Copyright Act sees a copy happening, and that is where that tariff comes into play. That tariff was bundled into the number I mentioned before at $938 per annum. That is inclusive of that tariff. It doesn't. It's not exclusive.
Yep. Okay. And what happens if a venue chooses not to take out a license? Do you pay them a personal visit?
if that's what it takes, then sure. Mate, look, it's funny. This question always comes up in webinars I do. I think, people are obviously generally curious, but it's sort of not one that I really like to talk about. Over 95%, I always quote this, over 95% of organizations, businesses that we deal with are readily compliant. But as we talk about before, understand the importance of music in business and to the greater entertainment and hospitality industry as a whole. What I'm dancing around is the 5% that aren't. Ultimately, OneMusic are under an obligation to protect the rights of their members, which means we can start sort of having a look at walking down the legal path. That's obviously not something we really like or want to do. So we will endeavour to make sure we can do everything we can to come to an equitable arrangement. But ultimately, we can, head down the legal pathway. Yeah.
And certainly I hope everyone on the call here, if they are brewers, like, we are here at Hawkes, we recognize people come for the beer, but they might stay around for the music or the band or the DJ or, whatever form of entertainment there is there. So it is, a critical part of our businesses. Are there other options, whether it's a music supplier or if I'm playing vinyl or playing the radio?
Absolutely. And it's something I should have mentioned earlier. You're absolutely right. So there's a couple of different options. I mean, within the terms of the license, we don't stipulate to you guys how you want to play or how you want to use music in your business. Absolutely, you can use good old-fashioned CDs. You can use good old-fashioned vinyl, even radio. These are all options available to you that will change the scope of the license. You mentioned music suppliers as well. Music suppliers, probably a little bit better known, I guess, in the hospitality industry. I'm sure many people on the call are aware, businesses that supply music to venues catered to their business. And again, you can jump on our website to have a look at a list of suppliers. But again, even if you're using sort of a music supplier, some licensing still may be required. Again, it sort of depends on the supplier. But yes, definitely other options available to you. Feel free to get in contact. We can walk you through them.
So let's say I get a band or a DJ to perform at my brewery, my pub, my restaurant, my bar. Does that change who needs to get the license, or is it still the venue, the pub, the brewery?
Yeah, that's right. So it's whoever's authorizing that performance is required to take the license. So in the example you just gave, because you are authorizing the use of music in your business through either background music or through performers, DJs, etc., yes, you would be the one that requires a license. Yeah.
Now I know there are various variables that drive the license fees and how they differ, but I'm curious, does the number of, say, TV screens or the number of music systems or devices that you're using to play music in your venue, are they kind of key drivers of the music license changing?
Exactly right. Yeah. So very, very simply put, the more devices in use, the higher the license fee. So as I mentioned before, the gold package allows for a single device. If you start going up from there, if you have multiple sort of TVs, et cetera, or multiple devices playing different music on different levels, depending on the size of your venue, et cetera, yes, the license fee may change. Again, dive onto our website. We've actually got the license will be there available for you with all the fee breakdown for you to have a look at. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'm a brewery, put myself in there, in the shoes of someone who's listening today. I'm a brewery. I'm paying this fee every year. Where does my money go?
That's the $1 million question, really, isn't
Hopefully,
it?
it's not $1 million, but
no. Your license isn't $1 million. No. So again, another question we get asked about all the time, Stav, and one that's probably a little bit more detailed in the answering. So what we're talking about here is a question around accuracy versus cost effectiveness, right? It would be impossible, and it would be impossible and to ask every brewery in Australia to report to us every song they play every day of the week, every year. That would just be impossible. We couldn't ask that. So we distribute licensing fees based on information we get from different sources. So radio airplay, radio sends us lists of what they've played. The personal digital services like Spotify and Apple Music, et cetera, send us data based on what's being played. Television broadcast logs, so what music is being played on television, as well as music recognition technology, which we'll talk about in a minute. I know we'll talk about that at the end, but we get data from all those sources and distribute the royalties based on the breakdown of that data. Now, is it the most finite way of doing things? No, but it is the most equitable way of doing things. And that was the way of distribution. It was voted on by our members. So that's the most equitable way we can sort of come up with. If any of your members are interested and you're having particular trouble sleeping for whatever reason, you can go on our website and read an entire breakdown of how very, very specifically we distribute the money, which is available on our website. Some lovely weekend reading there for you. So that goes into great detail about how we distribute our fees. But the top level is, yes, we get all that data from those different sources and pay out accordingly.
Yeah, well, certainly knowing a lot of people from OneMusic and APRA and so on and so forth, I know it's with a great care and deliberation that these fees are distributed, and have you got some sort of approximate percentage of of all that money collected, or how much of every dollar is going to artists? Shouldn't say artists, to rights holders, right? So songwriters, etc.
Absolutely. So about 86 cents in the dollar collected goes to the rights holder or the member, I should say. So yeah, we keep about, 14 cents in the dollar for administration. So talking about before, if we were to try and endeavor to get that information from every brewery every year, I mean, our cost to ratio would just skyrocket and we'd have no more money to pay to our member. So hence why we sort of collect the information in this way.
Yep. And so I've heard a little bit about Ordo. I feel like, sorry, AUDOO. I'm correct in saying that, Ordo?
That's right. Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about that, because I know we were talking about accuracy earlier. That may help in this process. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So Ordo's a music technology startup out of Britain, who's got backing by, I believe it's Bjorn from ABBA, so it's good. When ABBA gets involved, right? He doesn't put his name on anything, So it's it's music recognition technology. So Ordo have developed a device that's a small device that plugs into a location that accurately tracks all the music played in that venue. At the moment, I can also say I've got a list here of a couple of different venues we're in currently. So we're in Brewdog in Fortitude Valley, Herryman Brewery, Stays Brewery here in Sydney, Young Henry's as well here in Sydney, as well as Watts River Brewing, are all using these devices to more accurately collect data, so we can then start to more accurately pay out artists. Yeah. So that's really exciting. So again, on the website, if venues are interested, you can dive onto the website and apply to have one of these devices in your venue. Yeah, and there'll be a little bit more information about them on there too.
Yep. I mean, obviously, aside from petrol in the van and so on and so forth, are there other ways that music creators are, I guess, benefiting from a licensed business? These businesses getting licenses and obviously meeting their legal obligation, but I guess doing the right thing by artists that way.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I can only speak to my own experience, but the advantage was being recognized for the work that I did and being fairly remunerated for the work that I did meant that I can continue working. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know if you've got any sort of anecdotes you can share there, Stav, but.
Well, I mean, less from the artist. I'll take off the artist hat, which I took off some time ago. But I know here at Hawkes Brewing, we had Paul Kelly play at the venue. A very Kelly Christmas. So he was promoting some of the Christmas.
How does he make gravy?
Recorded. Yeah, exactly. And Tim Rogers from UMI played here recently. So obviously there's a platform where, artists can be shown via these kinds of venues. I'm sure there are plenty of publicans and venues on here that are supporting live music in that way, and the stats we read earlier, where 51% of the license holders are doing live music. So that's obviously fantastic. But yeah, ultimately, given 86% of the money collected is going back to the artists, and there's that kind of technology with Ordo to really accurately get it to the right people who are kind of played in venue. Certainly it's very important and has come a long way since when I was playing music. So it's a great thing. Are there any other questions that you think we maybe haven't covered from your perspective that you often get asked?
The big ones, I must admit, are around sort of Spotify and then how we distribute the money. So is any major questions though coming up in the Q&A, I'm more than happy to answer. Otherwise, I believe Annie mentioned that this was going to be recorded for posterity, so others can check it out.
I'll mute myself, but I won't put my screen on. There's a question here that the guys have had a question about. I guess it's a bigger brewery venue because they have formal music promoters come in and host music at their venue. And how does the licensing work in that area? Is it the promoter's responsibility, or is it the brewery's responsibility if a promoted music event happens there?
It's still, again, because the venue is, again, authorising the use of the music in that venue, it is still up to the venue to be licensed correctly. However, and again, I lean on Rob, Mark and Sarah in the chat for specific percentages on this, but it does adjust the fee depending on if you've got a booking agent booking your music, it does change the fee. Again, I don't have that on hand, so I'd lean on Rob or Mark to explain that in the chat. But yes, good question.
Are there any other questions that I guess participants have asked?
I'm just looking now, trying to catch up. A brewery, we're lucky enough to have an upstairs bar space as well as downstairs bar and outdoor space. And I guess that's another question, is where does, what are you counting? Is it outdoor, indoors? But this brewery's question, if they have a live band playing upstairs, but for the rest of the brewery, they have music through Spotify downstairs, what type of licensing combination would they need for that?
Yeah, so if there was just one device playing from, for example, a digital music service throughout the venue, you would fall under the gold package that we discussed before. And then depending on what your arrangement is with the band, where you are spending directly or you're engaged in the services of a booking agent. So in this instance, you would need the gold package. If you're using a digital music service, you would need the digital copy and delivery tariff, which is the combined $9.38 per annum that I mentioned before, and the 2.2% of annual expenditure on live music performance. So you just need those two, basically your gold and your live music, yeah, based on what you've just said.
And Jeremy, you were right on your 2.2, so that's quite right when you asked before.
Still got it.
If you paid a band $300 for a night, which will hopefully that's I think, Stav, is that the new guideline, about $300 to trying to get to $300 a gig?
Well, I certainly won't be out of retirement for that.
2.2 at 300 makes 22 makes $66. Is that right?
Yeah.
$6.60.
Yeah. Any other questions?
There was a question about the two versions of Spotify, and it is a good question because most people or most business owners do think Spotify is Spotify. So there is Soundtrack Your Brand and Spotify. And Spotify, of course, we all know is the one we, play in our headphones when we're commuting on the bus or, play when we go for a run. And then there is a version called Soundtrack Your Brand. What's the difference in licensing between those two? If I had Soundtrack Your Brand playing at my brewery, how would I be different?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and perhaps one I should have touched on earlier. We did speak a little bit earlier about music suppliers, and this is an example. So for those of you who don't know, there is a product that Spotify offers called Soundtrack Your Brand, which is, I guess, Spotify for business. Licensing is still required. However, it is different from licensing just your personal Spotify and your business. It is a lesser fee. So it would be, you would take away that digital copy delivery tariff. Which again, you're putting me on the spot. I can't remember off the top of my head because I only remembered 938 for the combined, but somewhere in the vicinity of 500 odd dollars if you were using a single device using Soundtrack Your Brand. Yes, so it essentially makes the digital copy and delivery portion of our license null and void, but you still need licensing.
A good question here, Jeremy and Stav, from someone who obviously cares about the independent artists, is that having the audio meter in a venue, how does that steer the funds from what's being played on Spotify to those that are being chosen by the venue, non-original artists, for instance?
Yeah, great. And I mean, we're only going to see, it's a great question. We're only going to see more and more of this stuff come up as technology improves. So what it means is, I mentioned before about sort of getting data from a multitude of different sources and being able to equitably pay out based off that data. What stuff like Ordo means is that we can start more quickly and accurately being able to directly distribute to those smaller artists. So because of that data collected, we can start more accurately again distributing that money. So hopefully the more this progresses, we can get more and more accurate with paying out directly to independent artists. How it works specifically, how the audio meter works specifically in doing that, that's another story for another time.
It's amazing, Jeremy. So we've seen some initial reports back from the Ordo people that are based in the UK, but they're moving all across the world. It's amazing the difference between what is being chosen by venues, how it differs from what the algorithm from Spotify, etc., the data that they send us. People are making independent choices to support maybe a local artist in their area, but definitely more Aussie music is actually being played than perhaps we all consume, in our private lives. So, and a lot more jazz. That's an interesting thing too.
Absolutely, and I mean, there's interesting. The more data you have, the more sort of information you have, the more you can kind of extrapolate. You know what I mean? We talk about accurate distribution for our members, which is obviously ultra important. But also it provides information about what works for business. Do you know what I mean? What music is working well, what time, when, et cetera, et cetera. So the benefits for the business too can be seen too. Yeah.
Just going to give people it's 1:38, so we're a little bit early, but if just as your opportunity to ask questions, so there's still 3 sitting there, we'll probably answer them live, I would say. But if you have any questions, please throw them in there now while we've got the guys here. And if you think of something when you get off the webinar, which often happens to me, then please hit us up at getalicense@onemusic.com.au and we can answer those and put them back into the transcript from this webinar so they all sit there together. Kelly, is there anything from your membership that you don't feel has been answered today that you'd like to have answered?
I suppose I do have those few questions that were raised, and I might just, raise them again just in case then they haven't been covered. I've sort of been listening and I think they might have, but let me just get them. So the questions that we've got here from members that haven't been able to attend the Q&A is around, could OneMusic implement a scale of charges for venue taking into account location, size, turnover, hours of operation, and number of staff? So that's the first question.
Sorry, what was it? Sorry, say again, Kelly. Sorry, I didn't
You're right. Can OneMusic implement a scale of charges for venues taking into account location, size, turnover, hours of operation, and number of staff? So this has come from a small regional brewery here in Victoria. They have a small venue and compared, their concern is that they're paying the same amount of money that a Melbourne venue, 3 times the size, more space, etc., is paying. So they would like to know Why? If not, how? Why there isn't that scaling pricing structure?
Well, the music, as we sort of talked about earlier, I mean, it's a great question. As we talked about earlier, the music use is sort of based off the number of devices. So the use of the music is the same as far as OneMusic considers it, you know. So yeah, the fee remains the same regardless of the size of the venue. The music use is the same, I guess, would be the broad answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions that a couple of our members have sent in. Another one is around, can OneMusic implement an objective of compliance across the board for any venue playing music that should be paying royalties? In my sample of the local community, there are numerous venues that are not being charged to meet the criteria,
So this was a question around,
I suppose they're in their area. Yeah, they're being asked by OneMusic to pay, yet they can walk down the street and other venues are not paying.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a difficult one to answer, to be honest. As I mentioned before, 95% of people we do get in contact with are readily compliant. I think I mentioned before our cost to sort of revenue ratio. There's only so many of us and there's only so many hours in the day is all I can say. We try and get to as many people as we possibly can. And as I said, the people that we do get to, 95% of them are compliant. Yeah. So far be it from me to ask your members to narc on their neighbours. I understand. We do try and get to as many people as we can, but as I said, there's only so many of us and so many hours in the day. Yeah.
Yep.
But I understand the frustration. Yeah, for sure.
Here again, sorry, just on that that original question that you had there about the size of a venue and a 100-seat venue being charged the same as a 400-seat venue. And so yes, there is a top scale, of course, like your tax. When you pay your tax, I think 50% is the top tax. I wouldn't have a clue. I'm not up there yet. Thank you. But that's for a dining space. So unless that venue actually had a separate dining space with a separate music source, that's when we count the seating capacity, and there is a limit of 100. After that, we don't count. But for the pubs, that's what Jeremy's saying, it's based on device and not on seating capacity. So there's absolutely no limit. So that must have been
they seem to around.
People might have got a bit, it may have got a bit confused about the scheme. So
they sit around 100.
Yeah.
Around 100. The other one is, would you consider consolidating a charge for licensed venues to be included in the licensing fee, thus reducing paperwork and engagement with yet another government department for business owners? Surely this would simplify the process, improve compliance, and increase revenue yield.
Man, whoever asked that question, tell me to give me a call and give them a job. But because, I mean, look, there's a lot of things I'd love to do, and this is and this is probably a broader conversation that goes a little bit off topic in terms of the everyday use of music in breweries. But because and the combination APRA and PPCA, that is OneMusic, we're not a government organisation. We're monitored by the ACCC. Look, the answer to that question is would that I could as a musician. That'd be great. But again, as I said, there's only so many hours in the day, and definitely anyone that is having that kind of conversation sits well above my pay grade. But if you want to dig me an email, I can make sure that person gets it for sure.
The red tape thing's a big one, Kelly. I think for all, like any small business, it's massive, isn't it? How many forms you got to fill in? I think that's where
we are one of the most heavily regulated.
Totally, I know. Yeah, you can childcare. We get the same sort of response from them. There's forms for everything, and I think inadvertently they're breaking the law because they just they can't keep up with the changes and the loopholes and the whatever. Totally get it. We are on, I guess, as close as we can get is that we are on. There's Australian Business Licensing Information Service, ABLIS is the website, and it has, which is a government website, and it has liquor licensing there. You know, if you need a grease trap, if you need a license to have your A-frame out the front, it's all there, and we're there as well. So we are there in one site, but because we're not a government body, I think there's no other way that we could have that licensed in a dual sense. Having said that, most states supply what liquor licenses have recently been issued, and we do follow up, you know, immediately after that, but there is a lag. I totally get that. It must be very annoying.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Yeah, they were the questions that were asked of those that couldn't attend today, and I would have chucked them in the chat, but couldn't get there. Oh, you're on mute, and
we're at 15 minutes to the hour, but and there's 3 questions still sitting there. I think our reps will probably get to those in the next couple of minutes. But I think we'll call that a wrap. Do you think we've covered everything, guys? Is there anything, Stav, you think we've?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say just one thing in part in closing, unless we get some more questions. Jeremy, you talked to the 95% of businesses that you deal with are compliant, is the word you used. I'd almost use the word supporters of the arts, and are doing the right thing, and are doing the legal thing. So while I commiserate with those that see their peers not doing the right thing, I just really want to implore the IBA membership base to do the right thing in this regard. There are 278 breweries that are supporters of live music and have this license. There are more than 278 breweries in Australia. So there are certainly some that are playing music in some capacity that should and could be paying these licenses. On top, the 51% that are playing live music, I want to applaud them in particular because they are supporting the arts in a way that's really important. So thank you for doing the right thing. Thank you for doing the legal thing. And thank you for supporting Australians that are having a crack in an industry that is even harder than independent beer. And I work in independent beer every day, and it's bloody hard. So, you know, we are a little family together, choosing industries that are very difficult to succeed in, whether that's artists, musicians, or independent brewers. So, you know, thanks to those who are supporting and doing the right thing. And I just encourage those that are on this call that maybe aren't in that camp to change that and you know, do the right thing and helpful thing by those Aussies having a bit of a go.